insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This radio show is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. WG Financial Group is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the United States government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by WG Financial Group.
A Roth conversion is a taxable event and may have several tax-related consequences. Be sure to consult with a qualified tax advisor before making any decisions regarding your IRA.
This radio show is a paid placement.
The Mark Levin Show.
And then you have Joe Biden, who takes credit for the vaccines. And now we're on track to have 200 million people vaccinated in his first 100 days. Those vaccines were produced, they were bought for, developed, and produced under the Trump administration. In fact, they have paid for 800 million vaccination shots.
Weekdays at 5 p.m. Only on News Talk 770 AM, 92.5 FM WVNN. Depend on it.
Rescue efforts continue for a third day following the deadly building collapse in Surfside, Florida. ABC Stephanie Ramos near the scene.
We're told crews are in the garage looking at license plates, trying to figure out exactly who was in the building. We're told those crews are working their way underneath all of that rubble.
Meanwhile, vigils as loved ones of the nearly 160 people unaccounted for gather nearby. 4 people confirmed dead in the collapse, lawsuits already being filed. Attorney General Merrick Garland announced that the Department of Justice is suing the state of Georgia over recent changes to its election laws. Garland indicating that the DOJ is looking at changes in other states as well. New York attorney Letitia James this morning announcing an agreement with Johnson & Johnson, the parent company of Janssen Pharmaceuticals, that will deliver a settlement of up to $230 million to New York State in damages related to the opioid epidemic. I'm Dave Packer, ABC News.
WVNN. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
The time has come for America to hear the truth.
We are going to stand with them, and not only are we going to fight for their rights, but we're going to stand up for our rights here in our state, in our homes, and in our communities. One day longer, one day stronger. One day longer, one day stronger. Because the future of labor's rights in the United States of America is not going to be decided in the courts. It's not going to be decided in Congress. It's not going to be decided on talk radio, and it sure is not going to be decided on Fox News. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong.
Good morning, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. It is Saturday, June 26, 2021, and we're broadcasting live online and on the radio on WVNN in the Huntsville, Decatur, Athens listening area from Athens, Alabama. A recording of this program will play tomorrow, Sunday, June 27th, 2021, on the great WGOL in Russellville, Alabama, and sometime next week on WHIV in New Orleans, Louisiana. We are coming to you today commercial-free, courtesy of the Alabama AFL-CIO. So get that number ready and give us a call for your bad boss stories, your organizing wins, your union questions, anything at all. Nothing's off the table. And the first folks on the line are coming to us live from the International Teamsters Convention. So we're really excited to get an update from them on today's Valley Labor Report. Remember, folks, the North Alabama DSA has a necessities drive this Saturday today and every Saturday from 3 to 5 p.m. at the IBEW Local 558 Union Hall on Clinton Avenue, right across from Yellowhammer and Campus 805. So bring by your non-perishable food items, your PPE, clothes, blankets, all that good stuff, and your donations will be forwarded to the Manna House. You can follow at DSA North Alabama on Twitter for more information. If you want to see what we're up to throughout the week and get our snide quips about the news of the day, then you should follow us on social media. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/The Valley Labor Report. We're on Twitter at Labor Reporters. I'm on Twitter at JacobM_AL. If you missed part of the show and want to go back and watch it later, you can search YouTube for The Valley Labor Report and subscribe to our channel. You can go back and watch the full show there, and we also clip segments and release them throughout the week. We also upload the program on more than 11 different podcasting apps. So to see if we are on your listening platform of choice, you can go to thevalleylaborreport.transistor.fm/subscribe. We've got a website where you can buy our fantastic union-made hats and union-made stickers. That is port.org. And finally, if you appreciate our work and want to help us stay on the air, then consider throwing us a couple dollars a month on patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. So, like I said, folks, our first folks that we got on the line are coming straight from the Teamsters International Convention. We've got Ryan Haney. He is a rank-and-file Teamster. We've got John Palmer, the Southern International Vice President for the Teamsters and a member of the Teamsters Reform Caucus, the Teamsters for a Democratic Union. Ryan, John, brothers, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Have you got mic 3 up? Can y'all hear us?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. I can hear you now. So, yeah, thank y'all so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Well, it's good to be here.
Great. So, Ryan, you had some context for the Teamsters that you wanted to that you wanted to give before we jumped into the conversation about the convention. So,
sure.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, first, just to introduce myself. I mean, my name is Ryan. I'm a truck driver out in Dallas, Texas. I'm a member of Local 745. But I wanted to, it's so cool that this convention is getting broader notice. I even saw something on NPR was covering it. But I wanted to zoom out a bit and talk about kind of what are the deeper goals? Why is this important? And I believe this is really bigger than the Teamsters. And that's why I think you wanted us to come on this radio show and talk about it. But, our goal, like your goal, is fundamentally to rebuild the power of the working class. That means real wages. That means fully paid health care. That means pensions and retirement. That means forcing political parties to prioritize labor over capital instead of, how it's done now, which is, backwards. Historically, what's worked is having large, strong, militant unions that represent workers in essential sectors of the economy. Unions where if workers decide to strike to withhold their labor, everyone has to take notice. The Teamsters Union used to be a union like this, or at least with the potential to be like this. Millions of workers organized in trucking, parcel, warehousing, logistics. But one thing that hampered us, or at least left our union unprepared to deal with this generalized attack on the working class that began with Reagan. What hampered us was having a union leadership that ran things from the top down, one that had become notoriously tied to the mob. One where members who stood up against were blackballed, they were driven out of the union. Some were even, beaten up and killed for standing up to this corruption. Teamsters for a Democratic Union, a caucus that I belong to as well, was born out of these conditions in 1976, I believe, and has been advocating for member democracy, insisting that more democracy and more member-led unionism will translate into more powerful unionism, will translate into working class power generally. So out of that movement, some important gains were won, like really incredible stuff, like giving every rank and file member the right to vote on top leadership of the union. The mob was driven out completely. There is still corruption. Like in any large organization, you're going to find corruption. You're going to find people who take advantage, but it's of a much less dramatic nature. And we have independent monitoring boards that were demanded by the rank and file and set up. And I'd say the Teamsters are now one of the most democratic unions because of this 40-year rank and file movement. And with the recent, with the achievements in our more recent convention that I'm going to let John give out, I think we're even better poised to go big on member-led organizing, having member votes on contracts that count 100% of the time, actually organizing member-led contract campaigns with some really big employers instead of these backroom deals. And it's this context that will allow us to rebuild our union and empower workers in large employers like Amazon, the logistics industry more broadly.
That's exactly right. And, you mentioned something there that was the broader conversation about the Teamsters for a Democratic Union, the fact that the Teamsters was, it was involved with the mob and things, but the members did not give up on their union in the same way that, and there are a lot of people that will say that unions are corrupt as a way to attack joining unions. That's something that bosses will say during campaigns and it's true to a greater or lesser extent, depending on the union and depending on what region you're in and things like that. But that's always one of the things that they say when you've got a union in your workplace. Oh, you shouldn't join it because it's corrupt, or your dues money is going to go to this or that or the other thing. And what the Teamsters for a Democratic Union have done, which is the same thing as people who are committed to a cause and to principles have always done, is they did not give up on their union, which was taken over by malevolent forces, because they recognized that even while it was taken over by malevolent forces, it was ultimately a force for good in a lot of people's lives, and it could be turned into a force for good in a greater way and for even more people's lives. When you have an institution like the Teamsters, like any union, the answer is not to give up on it. The answer is, if it's ultimately, it can be turned into a vehicle for the working class, for the emancipation, the liberation of working people. You can't give up on it. And this is an argument. We're on a conservative radio station. This is an argument that our listeners, that many of them that are on the radio, would take to heart as it relates to the United States of America. They think, that there are a lot of people that think at the upper echelons of our government there's the deep state and there's a lot of corruption, and that's certainly true, just like it was with the Teamsters to a greater or lesser extent. But nobody in the audience, by and large, is going to say, I'm going to give up on America. I'm going to give up on America. And just like y'all are not giving up on the project of the United States, also not giving up on the Teamsters. And I think that's really important.
Right. You nailed it.
So, Palmer, can you tell us about this convention? Ryan mentioned that, this has, and I mentioned that this convention, this Teamsters convention, has really penetrated the mainstream consciousness in the United States that international union conventions don't often do anymore. Now, of course, this happened all the time. Previously, there was all sorts of reporting on contract negotiations, on international conventions, because the labor movement was a center of power in the United States in the mid-20th century in a way that it's not really anymore. This convention has really, there are people that aren't even super politically savvy that I've heard saying, "Oh, the Teamsters are doing something. What's up with that, Jake?" And that makes me really excited. I'm like, like normies talking to me about unions. I love it. So, what the hell's going on at the Teamsters convention?
Well, quickly, a little bit about myself. I started driving a truck right out of the military in 1980, became a union member in 80, became a Teamster in 87, went out, immediately changed my life. First generation Teamster, lived in a town of low wages, San Antonio, Texas, transformed my life, let me raise 2 kids and a mother that stayed at home to take care of our children. We lived a solid middle-class life, owned all the things that people want to own: homes, cars, boats, all the toys that we strive to have in this capitalistic society. Sold out how it changed my life from not being able to run the air conditioner when I first went to work out of high school to being able to live a nice, solid middle class life. So it was aside from my family, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. I went on to work as an organizer for Ron Carey. We had a similar movement in the 90s. It was the 97 strike and a reform movement. We had at the convention in the 90s, we had a three-way race, and Ron Carey won with a little over 30% of the delegates, and then won a fairly large victory considering there were more than one group on the ballot. And then we were on the road to reform. And, later we slid back into the same sort of bureaucratic top-down movement that we had always been. I know Mr. Hoff is retiring. I won't spend a lot of time talking about that, but I think the members were suckered into thinking the Hoffa name really had power. I don't believe that to be the case. The power in labor is always the membership, not some crony sitting at the top of the organization. So this convention was interesting because the members 5 years ago had finally been fed up with what they'd seen, the lack of representation, they're not being heard, right? I'm an organizer. So I spent most of my career as an organizer, some of it as a business agent. They're not being heard. They are simply being fed a corporate line, and the dues need to come into the coffers at the international level, and the contracts are being negotiated in a manner that befitted the employers, and basically kept UPS in particular would throw money at the members, and we would lose language. We would subdivide our membership. So with the TDU movement, which has been around for a long time, we really began to engage people. I think the international and the leadership had done a really good job of attacking TDU and sort of staining it, tarring and feathering it, so that it was really, really hard to fight this fight. But as you say, no one gave up, and we got to this the last convention. I'll give you a really good example. The threshold to get on the ballot as a candidate set by the federal government when they didn't trustee, but the consent decree sort of governed the rules of was 5%. As Southern Region Vice President, I needed 8 delegates to get on the ballot. I got 9. There was a lot of ha about that, laughing. We're wasting our money on election, but the members spoke after that, and we won in the South with a 57% margin. So clearly the disconnect's obvious. This time, the disconnect is still there, make no mistake, but the momentum we built through grassroots organizing really, really brought us to a place to where we, this time I think I got, 45% of the delegates, which was the lowest vote count, but I'm still a TDU guy, so I'm not Captain Popularity. But that's not reflective of the membership.
Right.
The membership's yet to vote. We expect to get out and engage the membership and listen to the membership. And we expect to make a big difference. As for the issues, a couple of years ago, the UPS members had a contract shoved down their throat. Many of our members describe it in a much different manner than having it shoved down their throat.
Yeah.
And it felt that way.
So we'll leave it to their imaginations. Yeah.
Okay, I know we're on public radio, so it felt that way to many people. Our members were enraged. We've organized around that. We wanted to there were several issues. There was they call it a brownout because UPS is brown, but a blackout of information in those negotiations. The members didn't know what was going on. One of the things that we wanted to address was that we want rank and file members in every negotiations. No matter how skilled you are as a negotiator, you don't understand what it's like to walk the shop floor every day. That was a must. So we wanted to abolish the 2/3 rule, which means, I'll try to make it as simple as I can. the International was able to impose contracts if less than 50% of the membership voted. In this case, I think it was close to 50. I think it was in the 48, 49 percentile that the contract. And in the past, in supplements, the International went on, respected that vote, and went back to the table. This time, they stuck it down the members' throat, and the members were really, really angry. They created two-tier systems, second-class citizens. That's a problem throughout the labor movement. We cannot be doing that to our brothers and sisters.
Absolutely.
So all of these things came to a head, and there were a couple other issues we would have liked to see that we lost on. One of them is that to hold the general secretary's position, you would absolutely have to have spent 24 months working as a rank and file Teamster. We felt like that was important. We had an attorney running our union for the last 23 years. That speaks for itself how it played out. So that amendment failed. We wanted to uphold the 5% rule, which is critical to keeping democracy. That one failed, but the overwhelming issues of the 2/3 rule, having rank and file members on the negotiating committee, even the detractors had to own this and pass it. And the gentleman I'm running with, Sean O'Brien, and the remainder of the slate is a coalition of folks that are not all TDU. We knew that we had to pull together a coalition in order to make this happen. Sean O'Brien's very, very progressive. And he won the majority of the delegates, which is a big, long journey in 5 years. So that's sort of the overview of what's happening here. It really is a rebirth of democracy. If it had been for the government, honestly, the democratic values we have now wouldn't be there. And I'll reinforce that with one more thing, and I'll shut up for a minute. Is that TDU was instrumental in engaging with their attorneys, the federal government, and forcing us to get these democratic elements placed in our Constitution. So, it's really critical. The labor movement, it's not like Brian said in the beginning, it's really, really critical that unions become membership driven and militant. Let's be honest. Right. Corporate America gives two about us. They really don't care, and we have to we have to take a hold of this. We're stronger than they are. There's more of us, and it's time for a change in this country.
Right. That's absolutely right. And the importance of, it's not that of course there is an ideological commitment that you have and that I have to democracy and Democrats in a union's constitution, because we believe that workers are important, and we have this commitment to workers and worker power, but it's also there's a practical there's a practical nature to having these democratic elements and having a union that is member run, and which is that when you have a union that is really truly member run, which all unions are to a greater or lesser extent, there's a certain amount of structure there that is necessarily democratic, but you can have it to a greater or lesser extent, and the more that you have, the less room that people at the top have for corruption, for taking deals with the bosses behind closed doors, like the UAW president did some time ago. If there was more democracy, if there was more transparency in the negotiation process, if bargaining was open, if all members that are in that contract, that are under that contract, could see all of the negotiations, if all of the bargaining committees had more rank and file representation, if everybody leading the union had to be rank and file, because people in the rank and file, they don't want corruption, they don't want their leaders taking handouts from the boss, they don't want they want their unions to be good, effective organizations for them themselves and for their communities. And so the more membership control you have over the union, the better it is, and the more effective your union is going to be able to be. I want to remind everybody that we are coming to you commercial free, courtesy of the Alabama AFL-CIO. If you have a question for us, or if you have a bad boss story or anything like that you want to talk to us about after we finish talking to these Teamsters who are live on location at the Teamsters International Convention, you can give us a call. The phone number is 1-866-494-9866. So we're talking about the Teamsters International Convention with the Southern International Vice President, John Palmer, who is a member of the Teamsters for a Democratic Union, rank and file Teamster, who's also a member of Teamsters for a Democratic Union, which is the Teamsters Reform Caucus, Ryan Haney. The resolution that has really taken that has really caught everybody's attention, which, you know, there's some talk, especially in the labor space, about these other things which I think are really important and really good, is the Amazon resolution. John, can you talk to us about that? What exactly did it say, and what does that mean, like, functionally going forward?
Well, as you know well, resolutions are, we've all probably, if we've been activists, gone to a city council or, a group or, some sort of caucus and suggested that we move a resolution. So resolutions are strong statements that reinforce the goals and direction of an organization. They're not as binding as some other things, legal things that you can do, constitutional changes. But I think the entire labor movement understands the importance of Amazon. And this resolution reaffirms the commitment of the Teamsters, which happen to have just about every segment of the Amazon system as part of their core constituency, right? We're truck drivers, we have rail, we have ports, we have the warehousing, the entire supply chain. I mean, all the way into the landfill. We represent members in every segment of this supply chain, and I think it reaffirms that the Teamsters are committed to it. We see this as an existential threat to the to working men and women. Honestly, it's bigger. Again, labor needs to get out of the labor box as organized labor and become a part of the bigger community of the working class, and that's where we want to head. My personal view, along with many of the folks that are old organizers like myself, is that this, number one, this is Walmart on steroids. This is the whole. If they could, they're going to buy up the world, right? They're going to own everything. So I mean that, I'm not trying to be sarcastic. They're finding ways into all sorts of industries, and competition is beginning to dry up in this country. So it's going to take an effort larger than just the labor movement. It's going to take. And labor unions need to get over themselves and learn how to work together and get away from these turf wars and these egos that we have. As a long-term employee of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, I've got to tell you, the biggest, most damaging thing that we have are egos in the labor movement. The people who just can't seem to understand who pays their salaries. Yeah. But back to my earlier point, we're going to have to coalesce around community, environmental, religious, and other labor unions. I always tell people, again, I know I'm on live radio, but Jeff Bezos could crap the amount of money that we could spend in a lifetime as a labor movement, probably in a day, right, and affect our outcome. But he can't change the outcome of a militant uprising of men and women and communities that clearly understand what's going on, and that's our job. And I'll say to this, the failure of labor, large labor in this country, has been that we've taken on a paternal model instead of embracing the organizing model. The representational model should always be the organizing model. If we're going to win a strong contract at UPS, we're going to have to organize our members to fight for a strong contract. If we're going to win a long-term battle against Amazon, we're going to have to organize more than ourselves. We're going to have to organize the whole country to understand what a threat this move is with Amazon.
Right. And that's you mentioned that it's an existential threat. And why is it an existential threat? It's an existential threat because look what they're doing to logistics industries and warehouse industries and all these things. These were, middle class, single income, support a family jobs. And the Teamsters put out, in Southern California, Amazon drivers are making $16 an hour, where UPS drivers make $38 an hour plus health care and benefits, and I think a pension, right?
Yes.
And so, I mean, it's insane. It's absolutely insane what Amazon has been able to do, the propaganda that they've been able to put out into the media about, like, oh, look, we've got a $15 an hour minimum wage, and it's like, that was supposed to be a minimum wage for service industry workers. Like, that, this was not supposed to be a median wage for middle-aged people, and that's what Amazon has tried to turn it into, and that is why Amazon is such an existential threat to UPS drivers and to workers everywhere, and that's why this resolution by the Teamsters at the convention to unionize Amazon is so important, and I'm so excited that that happened. We're talking right now to John Palmer, the Teamsters International Vice President for the Southern Region, and Ryan Haney, both members of the Teamsters for a Democratic Union. We're going to take a break for the news at the top of the hour for just a moment, and then we will be right back with them to wrap it up. We are coming to you commercial-free, courtesy of the Alabama AFL-CIO, and we'll be right back.
Huntsville's #1 news, talk, and weather station. WVNN Athens. WVNN FM Trinity. A Cumulus station. It's 10 o'clock.
From ABC News, I'm Dave Packer. A race against the clock on day 3 of rescue efforts following the deadly condo building collapse in Surfside, Florida. Minutes ago, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
You wake up in the morning, hope it pulled out, and that just news hasn't been what we had hoped.
Rain and fire deep in the rubble hampering the search. Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Capa this morning.
It's a very deep fire. It's extremely difficult to locate the source of the fire. And so they've been working around the clock.
An agonizing wait for family members of the nearly 160 missing, like Bettina Obias.
When I passed by through the location of her apartment, I screamed and cried.
Now to Minneapolis in reaction after former police officer Derek Chauvin was sentenced to 22.5 years for the murder of George Floyd outside the courthouse. Brittany Gray, traveling from Milwaukee to be in Minneapolis for that verdict, make the trek with her infant son to hear the sentence, wanting to be in that spot where it happened.
To hear the verdict today is definitely, a relief.
And Floyd family attorney Benjamin Crump.
We feel that we are starting to make progress. This is an opportunity for America to reach a turning point where we say this is not the exception, but this is the norm.
Air conditioners aren't a must-have in the Pacific Northwest, where triple-digit temperatures are expected this weekend. Local officials now jumping into action as a heat wave bakes the region. ABC News senior meteorologist Rob Marciano reporting from Portland.
Multnomah County has opened massive cooling centers for anybody that needs to escape the heat, providing food, water, cots, and most importantly, air conditioning.
Albuquerque, New Mexico police reporting at least 5 people dead after a hot air balloon crash. Authorities say that balloon hit a power line. You're listening to ABC News.
If the pandemic's taught us anything, it's that the easiest way for germs to get into your body is the nose. We all know how to wash our hands, but how do you clean your nose? For over 2 million Americans, the answer is Navage Nasal Care. Navage uses powered suction to flush out allergens, mucus, and germs that cause congestion, colds, and flu, so you can breathe better, sleep deeper, snore less, and feel healthier. Better yet, Navage is all natural and drug-free. That's why one of America's top respiratory hospitals recommends nasal irrigation to stay healthy, explaining that bacteria and viruses thrive in warm and moist environments, and that you can wash away those germs so they don't make your nose their home. Experience Navage at zero risk. Go to Navage.com, buy Navage, and use it for a month. If you're not delighted, return it for a full refund. There's nothing to lose and a lifetime of better breathing to gain. Also available at Target Aid. Navage, N-A-V-H-E-E.
770 AM, 92.5 FM, WVNN. Depend on it.
Put it there, boy, and we'll
Show these fascists what a couple of hillbillies can do.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host Adam Keller. We've got a surprise guest today. David Story's joining us. He's going to chat with us, and we're going to take some calls after we finish talking to the Teamsters. And so, John and Ryan, David reminded me that Brian, what's his last name? Sean O'Brien. Sean O'Brien, he's a member of TDU, and he actually, he was the Teamster, I didn't realize who it was, that brought down a truck for an RWDSU rally during the Amazon campaign. And he's running for, what is it, president? Or what do you know? Do you remember? Do y'all know what Sean O'Brien's running for?
General President.
Just to clarify first, Sean O'Brien, he's not a member of Teamsters for a Democratic Union, but he is a member of this broader coalition that we've built, which, I think is important to note that, it's not just all about this scrappy rank and file caucus going up against the entire establishment or whatever. It's really been coalition building with people who, it's like we may not agree with on 100% of things, but we find that we agree on 80% of things.
Right.
And we run with that, and that's how we build power.
Right. Okay, that's great. Well,
so it's so great that he extended that support. You said to was it to the Bessemer Amazon campaign?
Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah, so what happened is there was a disgruntled former Teamster who was handing out anti-union propaganda at the gates by the RWDSU organizers, and O'Brien apparently heard about it, and he was like, we're not having the Teamsters name sullied as anti-union nonsense, so we're going to come down and we're going to come to a rally and we're going to, have our big Teamsters truck here, and so that's the kind of stuff that I do hope a more militant, a more worker-driven Teamsters and other unions can do across the country is lend our support to other organizing campaigns in whatever way we can to show that solidarity and things like that. Do y'all have any at all preliminary polling? Like, do you have any idea how the election is going to go after the convention is over?
I think it's safe to say that we will win a majority of the rank and file vote in the fall. Because we're going to be out there at the gates. We're going to be informing the members. We have a grassroots movement
that's really exciting. That's really exciting. So what are? Oh, I'm sorry, Ryan.
No, I agree with that. I think the difference in us and the other guys is that the grass and to Sean O'Brien's credit, he's embraced the rank and file movement. He understood that for a long time our union had been divided amongst sort of the old guard and reformers, and Sean understood that we couldn't continue to go on like this. This really is a microcosm of what's going on in our country, and he chose not to make this a two-party system but a unified group that could find common fronts like Ryan talked to earlier. And this is the first time in 30 years that we've really had it to be heard. We've been on the sidelines. Sean used lots of football analogies. We're in between the chalk lines now.
Right.
We'll be soon.
Right. Well, that's really exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing the results of the election. To wrap up, why don't you tell us what do you think the labor movement and working people at large can expect from a Teamsters union led by this coalition that TDU has pulled together?
Ryan, you want to tackle that? You want me to take it?
Sure. I mean, I think they can expect a union that's going to go bold. I think they can expect campaigns that are going to be more member-driven, which I think is very important. You mentioned earlier, we got to have these UPS drivers who do have a relatively strong contract talking about the conditions that they have through a union, not just wages, but also due process, protection against arbitrary termination, things like that, the vast majority of workers in America currently lack. But I really hope we go hard after Amazon. I actually worked at an Amazon facility in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It was the worst job that I've ever had. I can't underline that enough. It was miserable there. No one deserves to be in conditions like that. And I want to, since we're on an Alabama show, I want to extend credit to RWDSU and the worker supporters in Bessemer, even though that didn't go the way we wanted to see it. The fire under, everyone else's butt, including the Teamsters. We've had departments looking and researching this Amazon thing for, probably a decade, but no real widespread membership buy-in and education until now. So, and also I want to say that UPS will be negotiating a new contract in the coming years. UPS is the largest unionized private company in the United States. It's incredibly important that they negotiate a good contract, that they eliminate this awful two-tier system that was imposed by the outgoing administration. And we're going to need a lot of community support around that too.
Yep, that's exactly right. John, anything from you?
I think Brian is absolutely correct. The challenges are really, really profound. I think we need to unify the labor movement. It is absolutely the two-tier systems have proven. How long have those been going on? 30 years now. That they anger the members. They divide the members. Right.
That's what the boss wants.
We further, our society suffers from the same causes of creating classes. We need to be the motivator, the thing that rises. Makes all the boats float, right?
Right. John, Ryan, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to, this is Adam here. I just wanted to thank you guys both for what you're doing in the labor movement and what you're doing inside the Teamsters. And I want to thank you for coming on this show this morning and, trying to fill us in on what's been going on in y'all's section of the labor movement. And just a personal shout out to Ryan. Ryan, we had never met until the Strike Fest, and I want the audience to know Ryan drove all the way from Dallas, Texas, with an envelope full of cash donations from his Teamster brothers and sisters. So him and his very sweet wife drove all the way to Brookwood, Alabama, so they could donate in person and support the cause in person to our 1,100 coal miners still on strike down at Warrior Met. So that's the kind of activist and dedicated unionist that Ryan is. It's been a pleasure to get to know you that way, and look forward to hearing more about the great work both you guys are doing inside of the Teamsters.
That's exactly right. John, Ryan, thank y'all so much for talking to us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All right, so folks, we've been talking to Ryan Haney and John Palmer. John Palmer is the International Vice President for the Teamsters in the Southern region, and we're coming to you about the Teamsters Convention, about the Amazon resolution, and about their work in the Teamsters for a Democratic Union. And we're coming to you commercial-free today, courtesy of the Alabama AFL-CIO. So the phone lines are open. If you want to give us a call, 1-866-494-9866. You can talk to us. You can talk to us about anything you want. You want to call with a bad boss story? We would love it. You want to call with an organizing win? We would love it. You want to call with a union question? Teamsters Convention. Love to talk about that. Anything, nothing is off the table. Give us a call. 1-866-494-9866. One more time. That phone number is 1-866-494-9866. And just a reminder, we've got David Story in the house today. He came by to pick up something, and his wife is here with us. Thank you, Moon. And so David might be able to answer some questions if y'all have anything for him. So Adam, you had an update about the NEA staff organization kerfuffle that's been going on, right?
Yeah, so I just wanted to update you guys. Last week we talked about the NEA staff org, which is an affiliate of the National Staff Organization, representing the employees that work directly for NEA. Their organizing campaign is working, it appears. Wednesday night, they had a virtual solidarity rally, which went very well. They're getting a lot of support online. And the bargaining table, they resumed bargaining Thursday morning after the rally. It's my understanding and talking with a member that they're actually back at the table today, possibly tomorrow, and they're feeling good about where they're at right now because of the support. Which, we talked last week about the bad look it is to be a union who is mistreating your own staff union employees. Right. So keep it up. For those of you who haven't checked it out, neaso.org/strike. You can check out their demands. Right now, they're asking that you share their demands, particularly those of you who are educators who belong to NEA, even retired members. It goes a long way for those of you to share that. They do have a virtual picket been organized, but right now it hasn't come to that yet. So we'll keep you posted on how things are developing with that strike or potential strike. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. But really proud to see my brothers and sisters from NSO organizing in D.C., trying to get a fair contract that they deserve out of NEA headquarters.
Yeah.
And something I think that our discussion this morning with the Teamsters reform efforts and with, this internal battle within NEA is that, with the Valley Labor Report, we are unabashedly pro-union, pro-labor, pro-worker. We will defend and promote unions whenever possible. But at the same time, we are loyal to the mission and to the membership and to the movement, which isn't always the same as individuals and institutions. And like any institutions, unions have their pros and cons. Sometimes they have bad leaders. Sometimes they have good leaders. Sometimes they have issues that need to be resolved and improved upon. And I think our brothers from the Teamsters this morning put it great that where you go to solve those problems is to the members. And the more power is in the hands of the rank and file, the more power we will have in our unions, and thus the more power we will have in our economy and our society. So I think that's where, there's a common thread there, that we're not just naive cheerleaders who are sitting here thinking that every union is doing everything 100% correct and, every president and executive director walks on water. We've all been around long enough to know that's not true. But what we do know is that unions are ultimately working class institutions. So there's some parallels between, working to reform a union and some of the conversations about joining Democrats or joining Republicans to try to remake them. But the difference is that unions are made up of working class people. They are funded by dues from working class people. And they are made up of members who are working class people. And there is, at least theoretically, some amount of accountability to those working class members. And you can't say the same about the Democratic Party or the Republican Party.
Right.
So that's where those parallels kind of dovetail, and I think why it's so important what Ryan and John are trying to do with Teamsters and what so many of us are trying to do with other unions across the country.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And speaking of holding institutions to their purported values, somebody asked about this in the YouTube chat, and it's something that we talked about last week, so we'll just give a really quick update on that. We talked last week about how the MSNBC is union busting wokely, how they said that having a union there, which would mean union dues being paid by their workers, would discourage black and brown workers from working at MSNBC, which is just the most absurd thing that anybody can think of.
There's so much that's wrong with that statement, really.
There's so much that's wrong with that. I mean, it really is insane. Black union workers have like 10 times the wealth of non-union black workers. Black workers and unions make their income is significantly higher. I mean, it's just, it's so silly. And to think that their black workers wouldn't understand that, especially in a news organization where they're supposed to be fact-finding and things like this. It's so condescending and paternalistic and racist in a lot of ways, honestly. But they refused to cave to pressure to voluntarily recognize their union, which, again, is industry standard in the media world. They did not voluntarily recognize their union, and so the staff at MSNBC did file for an election with the NLRB. So we'll keep you updated on that, and we will let you know when they win their union at MSNBC, and hopefully, maybe we'll see if their content becomes watchable. That would be great. That would be.
I'm not going to hold my breath,
I'm not
but
holding my breath,
I certainly hope the folks who are actually doing the work over there get a little bit of the massive amount of profits they make from Comcast and their corporate advertisers, all that big pharma money. Because Lord knows, if you turn on cable news, just about every commercial is a medication, a prescription they're trying to sell you, and they have side effects usually worse than whatever it is they're supposed to be curing. So that's the cable news experience.
Yeah.
We here do not accept advertisements from Big Pharma. We are sponsored by listeners like you.
That's right.
Donating to our Patreon and PayPal, and of course the Alabama AFL-CIO, the Machinist Union, and other great supporters. So and we appreciate that support.
Yep, that's right. So if you want to give us a call, the phone number is 1-866-494-9866. Let's go ahead and look at what happened last week in Southern Labor, brought to you by Jonah Furman. You can subscribe to get Last Week in the Rest of Labor on Substack. The title of his newsletter is Who Gets the Bird? But he has said that we could pull out what happens in the South and talk about it every week on our program. So we appreciate his work pulling together that. And I'd encourage you to read the rest of the newsletter. So this can kind of be like the teaser. You can go and see what's happening in the rest of the United States at Who Gets the Bird on Substack. So let's look first at new organizing. 18 sanitation workers for Joachim Refuse in Wheeling, West Virginia are organizing with the Teamsters, Local 697. Thank you, Teamsters. 10 drivers for Triple Crown Concrete in Somerset, Kentucky are unionizing with, again, the Teamsters, Local 89. 7 workers who make synthetic rubber for Zeon Chemicals in Louisville, Kentucky, again, are organizing with the Teamsters, Local 89. They are on a roll over there in Kentucky and West Virginia. 28 tire production workers in Titan in Jefferson, Georgia, are organizing with the Steel Workers. 28 security guards for Acima and AEPS contractors in Triangle, Virginia, are joining UGSO, Local 290. Not familiar with them, but good for them. 8 aircraft welders for Amentum in Corpus Christi, Texas, are joining the Machinists Union. That's right. 7 workers for Gold Belt C6, which Jonas on federal contracts in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, are also joining the Machinists Union. So congratulations to them and David for his union there. NLRB wins 21 workers at ALS USA, which does geochemistry lab work in Fairbanks, Arkansas, narrowly voted 8-6 to join Laborers Local 942. SEI Healthcare Illinois, Indiana lost a massive decertification vote among 658 workers at Research Medical Center in Kansas City, Missouri, which is owned by the notorious Hospital Corporation of America. The final count was 203 to 171, although Jonah notes that members of the union are disputing the process and the results, so we'll see what happens there. Strikes and bargainings. Updates on strikes and bargainings. The 2,900 worker UAW Local 2069 strike at Volvo Truck in Dublin, Virginia is continuing. Shortages are now affecting other Volvo operations at a plant in Maryland. The company is apparently back at the bargaining table, which is what's shutting down operations and supply. That's why strikes work, because the work is done by the workers. So if workers refuse to do the work, then the work doesn't get done. The bosses aren't going to be able to do it. There's not enough of them, and they don't know how to do it. So that's why withholding your labor is such a powerful and is the most powerful weapon that workers have. Exxon seems to have no interest in ending 50 steel workers at their refinery in Beaumont, Texas, and they are dead set on gutting the union seniority system.
That was been going on for quite a while, right?
Quite a while. Jonah notes that elsewhere in Beaumont, ATU Local 1031, bus operators for the city's transit system have released a statement saying they hope to avoid a strike, which is a nice way of saying that they're ready to walk, having authorized a strike earlier this month. So hoping for success for them. And finally, the last update in the South is that the 1,100 striking Alabama UMWA members, our sisters and brothers down there in Brookwood, took their fight to Manhattan this week, organizing protests outside of the offices of 3 hedge funds that hold large stakes in Warrior Met, and they would therefore have some amount of influence in moving the company to settle a contract. If you want to read more about what happened in New York and what happened the week before down in Brookwood, where they stopped scabs from coming into the mines, you can follow Kim Kelly at Grim Kim on Twitter. She's written some really good articles. She has a fantastic documentary, some short mini films about the strike just in general, out at The Real News. I have still not been able to sit down and watch it, but I've heard really good things about it. Definitely check that out. And also, I'm going to have an article about the picket line a couple weeks ago and the New York action coming out in the print issue of In These Times magazine, which is free to all union members. Free to all union members just through the end of this month, I think. So if you are not subscribed to In These Times and you want to get a nice magazine to put on your coffee table, but you don't have the money for it, and you're a union member, which includes the IWW is a union, then subscribe for free. And you'll be able to read my article about the strike there. And I'm sure it'll come out online at some point. So
I want to shout out In These Times magazine. It's doing great journalism, and I know Hamilton Nolan from the magazine participated in our live stream fundraiser for the mine workers. And shout out to Kim Kelly and Max Alvarez and all the folks at the Real News Network. They are doing great work covering the strike. We mentioned MSNBC in the mainstream media, which is corporate owned and corporate aligned, and there are issues like this that just never get any attention. And so that's what we're trying to do here with a local spin on it. But what In These Times, Real News Network, and freelancers like Kim are doing is really filling in the void of real information about working class issues that are relevant to working class lives.
Yeah. And so, again, all that information is in Jonah Furman's Who Gets the Bird newsletter. You can find it on Substack.com. It is fantastic. And it is, I think that for me, every week when I read it, it's a little shot of hope that I get, reading about. Because especially if what you tune into is conservative talk radio or MSNBC or CNN, everything is that there's this kind of great man view of history and view of the contemporary world, that there are a few great people that are making all of the moves, and they are who our lives depend on. And when you actually find find stories about workers taking their lives into their own hands, it can be, it's almost like a drug. It's really nice seeing workers taking their lives into their own hands and controlling their destinies in a way that a lot of capitalists, bosses, mainstream media doesn't want you to believe is an option. And so all of these things are happening all over the United States. It took us about 10 minutes to get through just what's happening in the South. So check out what is happening in the rest of the United States at Who Gets the Bird on Substack.com, written by Jonah Furman.
And another great thing about that, I noticed a lot of small shops, when you open up about new organizing efforts. And a lot of times I think the stereotype of unions is you envision a factory floor, with 1,000 workers, something like that. But many of us worked or currently work in small shops. There may be a dozen employees or less there. You too can organize. You too can unionize. And in fact, there are certain advantages to that. Obviously, it takes less people to organize less people. So if you're sitting there thinking about your workplace and how there's only 7 or 8 of you guys there, you can do it too. Yeah. And in fact, you may have some opportunities there to take advantage of that, maybe aren't there for some of these bigger employers and bigger work sites. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of hope that you can organize, because we all need to.
Right. Yep, that's exactly right. So, folks, just a reminder, we are coming to you commercial-free, courtesy of the Alabama AFL-CIO. Thank you very much to President Bryn Riley and the Executive Board for sponsoring the last Saturday of every month so that we can come to you commercial-free, so that we can take your calls. The phone number is 1-866-494-9866. We've got about 30 minutes left in the program, so give us a call so that we can have something to talk about. Bad boss stories.
We do legitimately have things to talk about, just so you know.
Right,
but
sure,
we would love to have your calls and your participation as well. And if you can't call, feel free to chat in on Facebook or YouTube and tell us what you're thinking.
Right. And bad boss stories going to get you to the front of the line. Questions about unions, especially like from a skeptical place. Like I had a good conversation the other day with somebody that I just happened to kind of talk to, a person that I didn't know in public, asking me about why are unions good? Like what's all this about unions? Why do you like unions? And it was just a total stranger, and it was a good conversation. I think I was able to tell her some things that she didn't previously know before. And so if you're coming from a skeptical place, I'd love to answer your questions and hear your thoughts. But of course, bad boss stories, organizing wins. Give us another shot of hope this morning. That would be really great. So again, the phone number is 1-866-494-9866. One more time before we go for the break. 1-866-494-9866. We will be right back. This is the Valley Labor Report.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison. This is News Talk 770 AM, 92.5 FM, WVNN. News starts now.
In Surfside, Florida, crews frantically searching for survivors in the rubble of the partially collapsed condo building north of Miami Beach. The death toll has not changed since yesterday. 4 people confirmed dead, 159 still unaccounted for. Miami-Dade Mayor Daniela Levine Cava says spot fires and smoke are the biggest hurdles for crews.
It's a very deep fire. It's extremely difficult to locate the source of the fire. And so they've been working around the clock.
The cause of the collapse still unknown. Johnson & Johnson agreeing Saturday to pay $230 million to resolve New York opioids-related claims as part of a settlement with the state's Attorney General's office. J&J also agreed to end the sale of all opioid products nationwide. The agreement comes 2 days before the biggest trial for opioids was set to begin in Suffolk County. In New Mexico, at least 4 people are dead and 1 person injured in critical condition after a hot air balloon crash in Albuquerque. Michelle Franz on ABC News.
WVNN.
All power to the workers. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host Adam Keller. We've got a surprise guest in the studio here to pick up some stuff, David Story, and it is Alabama AFL-CIO Open Line Saturday. The phone number is 1-866-494-9866, and the lines are open for bad boss stories, organizing wins, union questions, anything at all. The phone number is 1-866-494-9866. Adam?
I swung by to pick up a check, and I'm being held hostage.
Yeah.
Someone send the police.
Yeah.
So,
Not the Huntsville police, please.
Anybody but them.
Speaking of which, the ongoing saga to get criminal justice reform and police accountability in Huntsville continues. If you missed our interview, David and I talked with Chad Chavez about a month or so ago. Citizens Coalition for Justice Reform in Huntsville is doing a great job, along with Black Lives Matter Huntsville and other organizations. They're continuing to hold the city council's feet to the fire. There was some discussion at the last meeting about some changes. It was then pulled. So I definitely encourage you to follow your city council meetings. I believe they will have one coming up. If not this Thursday, it should be the next Thursday. A few other events happening that I wanted to share with you guys. Alabama Rise, another friend of the show, they are having a Healthcare for All online meeting on June 29th at 6 p.m. If you're not familiar with them, Arise is a coalition advocacy group. They do a great job in Montgomery monitoring the legislature, pushing for relief for poverty, pushing for government transparency, criminal justice reform, voting rights, you name it. All good stuff. And they are a leader in the hashtag Cover Alabama coalition, which is pushing to expand Medicaid. If you haven't seen it, there was yet another report that came out recently talking about the jobs that would be created by expanding Medicaid. And I thought that the politicians in Alabama were all about jobs, jobs, jobs. They're happy to bribe multinational corporations and Yankee corporations to come down here and exploit our cheap labor. But when it comes to providing health care to over 300,000 working-class Alabamians and creating thousands of good-paying jobs, they're nowhere to be found. So we need more and more folks to really join in with that coalition. I'd like to see some unions pass resolutions, get their locals involved in supporting the effort. We need the education community to jump on board because, a family that has health care is typically going to be easier to educate their kids when they're not stressed about their parents going to the doctor. A few other events we have coming up. We have the Midsummer Festival happening tonight.
That's right. Oh, man. Thank you so much for reminding me that I forgot. I'm going to be there tonight, but I wanted to mention it on the show today. And I'm so glad that you had that written down because I totally slipped my mind.
Yeah. Obed Edom is a band that we had on the show not too long ago. They have generously lended their music to our intro. And great guys. They're playing tonight. The festival starts at 5 p.m. It's going to be at Lee Acres right outside of Huntsville. Supposed to go to 10:30, probably later. So if you're interested in a music festival here locally with a lot of local talent, check them out.
It ends at 10:30, but if you want to camp at Lee Acres, you can pay like $20 and bring a tent or something, and you can stay overnight. So that's an option as well. It's BYOB as well.
Another friend of the show, Charles Hastings, known as Solo Monk 256 on Twitter. I believe he has a new album coming out just in the next week or two. So definitely follow him at Solo Monk 256. He's done some great artwork for our show. Puts out a lot of great music as well. And the newest edition of Labor Notes that I just got in my mailbox yesterday features an article from our very own Jacob Morrison. It was also published in Jacobin magazine, and it's about how conservatives love coal miners until it comes to an actual labor battle, as we see here. Because as you can tell, conservatives in Alabama are not jumping up and down to support those 1,100 sisters and brothers on strike in Brookwood, Alabama. So check out that article if you missed it. And the last thing, I believe, would be the State Board of Education is having its upcoming meeting and work session on July 13th. You got a couple weeks to prepare for that. It's going to be broadcast online. And the only reason I mention that is because we've seen a lot of people like on this station obsessed with what they're calling critical race theory. I'm not sure that any of them could explain that to you, but the state superintendent has already, done some red meat, throwing that out there to the base, working with Governor Ivey. So we expect that to be a conversation at the State Board of Education meeting coming up. If you have thoughts about that, you might want to tune in. It's probably going to be stupid, is just my guess. I'm gonna go ahead and I'd bet you $20 that the conversation you hear will be asinine and make you lose brain cells. But
it's stupid to even discuss this because it's my understanding that critical race theory isn't taught in any primary schools.
It's not.
It's at a secondary, school level, and
like
here we are.
Collegiate level.
Yeah, drumming up drumming up anger among people just to have something to fight about.
Right, and of course that is American politics, fighting windmills, and creating imaginary enemies that you can then fight culturally.
That's exactly right, and that is something that I hit on in the Labor Notes article, and it's online as well. If you don't subscribe in print, you can find it online. The title's something like "Conservative Talking Heads Love Coal Miners Until They Go on Strike," and something that I point out is that when coal miners, really it's just coal bosses, but when coal miners, this deified, idealized perception they have of them in their imagination, not real people, but just this imaginary figure that they have, can be used as a cudgel in a cultural battle that will have no material impact on anybody's life. When they can be used in that way, conservative politicians and talk radio hosts and TV personalities love coal miners. Absolutely. They could not get enough of coal miners. And we can look at what happened when in 2016, I believe it was, when Hillary Clinton said, we're going to put a lot of coal miners out of business. And that was bad. That was a bad statement. Absolutely. That was worded terribly, and she deserved flack for that, and she got it from, I believe, the left and the right. But did that culture war battle actually have any material impact on any coal miner? No. It was only these buzzwords. It was just a culture war battle. It was just another battle in the culture war. Here we have over 1,000 coal miners. That means there are over 1,000 families directly dependent on wages from Warrior Met Coal, and Warrior Met Coal is directly dependent on them for their coal output, directly dependent on them. And they are on strike right now because Warrior Met has not held up their side of the understood bargain, which was that 5 years ago, the workers are going to take concessions to save the company. Once the company is saved, they will get those things back. And Warrior Met is refusing to give them what they deserve. They're refusing to even come to the bargaining table in a lot of instances. And unless it's me, unless I am on the radio, you don't hear a damn thing about it. Not on Twitter from the people that represent you or that want to represent you or that represent the people in Brookwood or want to represent the people in Brookwood. You don't hear anything about it. This is the largest strike in Alabama in decades. The largest coal miner strike in Alabama in decades. And Republican politicians and their mouthpieces in the media are not saying anything about it. Anything at all. Anything at all. And why is that? Why is it that they will spend hours and hours and dozens and hundreds of tweets and content and airtime and Facebook posts and news segments on critical race theory, on the great cancellation of Dr. Seuss, on any of these other, on Starbucks cups? Why is it that they will why is it that they will spend so much time on these totally performative, immaterial things, and they won't lend their support, they won't galvanize their audience to support actual working people in Alabama, actual conservative, in many cases, working people in Alabama? Again, I've said this multiple times. I saw Trump hats on the picket line, okay? Where are these conservative politicians and media figures? They're nowhere to be found because this strike has something that these other culture war issues do not, which is working class solidarity wielded against the boss. Okay? You don't have that in the bashing Hillary Clinton for saying she's going to put coal miners out of work. You don't have that when we're talking about Dr. Seuss's estate taking down one of his books because they had racist caricatures, and you don't have that when you're talking about Starbucks cups. There's no working class anything in that is a completely constructed culture war issue. In Alabama, there are 1,000 coal miners that are conservative, liberal, and black and white, and men and women coming together across all of these ideological and gender to come together to fight for each other and for their families and for their communities against a corrupt corporation, against New York hedge funds. And if they can do it, then maybe the people in this audience can. And we can't have you thinking anything like that.
You know, the one thing that all of these people that you just talked about, all the talking heads, all the radio show hosts, all the corporate media, all the politicians, the same thing that all of these, including most of the radio hosts on this station, the rest of the 24 hours that we're not here, what they all want you to believe is that the politics are going to save you. That if you'll just elect Biden, if you'll just elect Trump, if you'll just elect Reagan or anybody else,
and keep buying our products. Please subscribe.
That everything is going to be wonderful. Your life's going to be so much more wonderful if you'll just, and they want you to put all your faith in politics. And the last thing that they want you to understand is that if you form a coalition of workers and increase your wages and get better health care, pay less for health care, all of a sudden, when you're making decent money and you don't have to worry about going to the hospital for emergency surgery, and you don't have to worry about is the school going to help subsidize my child's meal, all of a sudden when you have all of these great things, most of your concerns about these culture wars goes away. They're not important anymore because guess what? Your standard of living is raised, and you're really not worried about all the horse crap that they're selling you.
Right, and that's something that W.E.B. Du Bois talked about in one of his essays, which was the psychological wage that white free laborers in the antebellum South got from not being on the bottom rung. Right, and there's some certainly it's disanalogous in a lot of ways because we're not talking exactly when we're talking about, but the way that it is analogous is that it's a distraction. It's a distraction for those free white laborers during slavery. It was a distraction to them. For the white plantation owners to be able to point to the black slaves and say, look, there's somebody one rung below you so you can be happy. Or, look, they're the people that you should be mad at instead of us. When what would have actually benefited the free white laborers is to free the black slaves. But they were able to convince a lot of these free white laborers to hate the slaves, to think themselves better than the slaves, to not support slaves in their various rebellions or the cause of liberty for them. And that is what so many of these culture war issues are about, is distracting you to make you think that, oh, if only I can keep my fourth grader from learning critical race theory, which is not something that any fourth grader learns anyway, like that this is the issue that the fate of the country is going to rest on. Like it's totally nonsense. What is the fate of the country actually going to rest on? It's going to rest on the material stability and the community of workers. That's what the fate of this country rests on. But they want to distract you and get you mad at your brothers and sisters by ginning all this up, by making stuff up about critical race theory, by talking about it so much like it's being taught to kindergartners. I mean, I actually heard news segments about, oh, this is such a terrible thing to teach to 4 and 5-year-olds, and it's like, What 4- and 5-year-old is in law school? I mean, I never even heard about it. I never heard of critical race theory until 2 months ago, and I took graduate level philosophy courses. Like, this is just not something that most people learn about over the course of their lives. And it's so silly to be distracted by this when there are workers fighting for their lives, when companies are trying to ground workers into dust, and we need to come together and fight on these material concerns, not on just this total BS.
Well, like you said, it's distraction and it's also division, because our most powerful weapon we have is our numbers and the solidarity we can build inside of those numbers. To take it back to what one of our Teamster brothers said this morning, we'll never have the money that the billionaires have, but we have the people. And the more you build solidarity, the more you forge relationships in struggle for one another, loving one another, taking care of one another, the more you can transcend some of those divisions, which are artificial, which have been created by the bosses and politicians. And that's really the key moving forward to building a better country, a better state, a better world, is that we work together across these lines, across race and gender and religion and sexuality and all these other, identities and, in some cases, artificial identities. Because in the United States, it seems, the most important thing is that they want you to identify as a consumer with a certain identity. You buy certain products, you think certain way, you follow certain people. It's all driven by consumption, distraction, division. Right. And when you actually get out into the real world and you help one another with real struggles, when you go out and you fight in the workplace and you win a raise, when you win benefits, like David said, all that stuff just kind of falls in the background because you see how fake it is. It's all, it's the Matrix, basically, is what it is. And something that I wanted I meant to mention is that there was actually a poll done at the start of June that there is a massive amount of support for the PRO Act. Right. So, while politicians and the media are focusing on all these silly issues, here we have a piece of legislation that would, greatly improve the labor movement in this country. It would greatly improve the everyday existence for working class people in this country. And there's substantial support, even among Republicans. In fact, 40% of Republicans in this poll said they support the PRO Act, along with 74% of Democrats, 58% of independents. Now, that's pretty damn good. And you're not going to find a lot of issues in this country that has that level of broad support. So that's,
why isn't anybody talking about it?
Right. Right.
Because it'll shift the balance of power to workers.
Right.
That's why.
And that's what it all boils down to, right? Is power. When you're not dependent on a spouse or an employer to have health care, that gives you power. When you know that you have brothers and sisters who will back you up, if you're being picked on by your boss, being harassed, being terminated by your boss, you know that you have people to back you up. That's power. Right. And there's real power in that community. And that is the thing that scares the bosses and the politicians more than anything, is when they see ordinary, everyday people across divisions building their power.
It's something that the conservatives talk about a lot, but they don't follow through with it. When the people out here on the street recognize that we don't need you any longer, that we don't need the politicians, and we really don't need the bosses any longer, it scares the hell out of them, But the conservatives, they talk a good game about it, but they never follow through on what actually creates that system, and that creating part of creating that system is leveraging the power that the workers have. Right. They want you to be crippled. They want you to think that either the right Republican clutch or the left Democratic clutch, that you need one of those crutches to help you walk through life every day, and you don't.
Right. I think both parties are apt to describe symptoms of our current system to promise solutions to those symptoms, but we never get into what is causing all these symptoms, because there is a root cause there, and that's our socioeconomic system that both parties are established to defend. So I think the building power is important. The more we build unions, that gives us power. The more we set up worker co-ops and establish our own production outside of, when we get to the point where we don't have to rely on them, to feed our families,
happens?
When that happens, I think it can, and I think it will. The more we build our own co-ops, the more we build our own unions, the more we can control the economy ourselves to take care of one another, the less we have to even fool with these people and their distractions.
Yeah, and you're not going to do, and it all goes back to the same thing that I've been saying. You're not going to do that through a political party. A political party is there to provide a crutch for you. No matter what side you're on, it's there to provide a crutch for you. You will build power through working class organizations, through unionization, and and eventually, it would be my hope that eventually we do away with government in completely. What's the reason of having centralized government when we got our communities taking care of each other out here in our region? There's no reason for it anymore. You quit paying those taxes to support big business, and it starts going directly into your community, into health care, and things like that. There's a concept that I won't use the name of what that's called, but if that sounds good, I would say get involved with some unions.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We've got a call to wrap us up. Mel Sutton is on the line. Mel, you wanted to ask a question. What you got?
Y'all had mentioned the two-tier wage structure, and I was a witness to that two-tier wage structure, and its sad effects. The other point I'd like to make, y'all to discuss, is the loss of defined pensions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Not absolutely.
The loss of defined pensions is, I don't know. It's not good. It's not good for the future of the labor. I mean, to lose these defined pensions, and I enjoy my defined pension right now, which was funded by the company I work for.
Yeah, well, it was funded by your labor. It was
right. It was part and parcel to the master labor agreement that I worked under.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was, you gave up part of your of what that slice of the pie the company was willing to give to you. So, but these companies have gone after these defined pensions. Now, what's the future going to look like when the common guy out there on the shop floor, is he going to fund those 401k plans?
No.
Because if he,
or what happens when he gets ready to retire, right as the stock market collapses, as happened, twice in the past decade, and that 401k suddenly, plummets in value, right as he's ready to retire.
Well, and I remember this. I'll make this point, and then I'll let y'all discuss it. But I won't never forget when George II won re-election, and he was all full of himself, and they were all ready to turn Social Security into the stock market.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And thankfully it failed.
I remember that very
Thankfully
well.
It failed. But now, yourself, Social Security is under fire too.
Yeah. Always. Yeah, I mean, the defined pension, Social Security, everything that allows us as workers to stop working is constantly under attack because they don't want us to stop working. They want, if we stop working, then all of a sudden we quit paying taxes into a system that's designed to rob from us.
I don't want this to sound morbid, but I envision a future where the common guy on the shop floor does not have a defined pension, and in his elder years, he's
working at Walmart as a greeter.
How many greeter jobs is there going to be?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How many? And with that, I mean, I'll just turn it back to y'all, and y'all can discuss it or not. So, but I just think about the future and that two-tier wage structure, guys.
Yeah,
it's not good.
Great.
It's not good.
It's absolutely really worrying. Thank you, Mel, for calling in. And that's and that's it's and
nice
the way
to hear
fix
a
it.
caller that actually
right.
has some sense.
Right, I know. It is really worrying about the future, about workers not having defined pensions. No one except union workers has defined pensions anymore. And tying our ability to retire to the stock market is real.
Except union workers and bosses. There's a ton of CEOs that's got nice defined pensions.
But how do you fix that? You fix that through worker organization, through unionizing. And so if you don't have a union in your shop, you got to get one. David, can you talk to us some about the that two-tier wage system to bring us out? Like, why people hear that, I think, and that aren't in unions, and they don't understand like why that's bad.
Yeah, I mean, two-tier wage systems come into place probably maybe in the late 80s, mid to late 80s. I think the first ones to do it was General Motors, and but basically what they said is all you auto workers are making too much money. If you want to continue making all of this money, sell out the people that you don't know yet. Sell out the people that we haven't hired yet, and allow us to bring them in at $12 an hour instead of $20 an hour. And it's created division in the workforce. And now you've got a large workforce that's making half of what the elder workforce is making.
Right. That's exactly right, David. 2 tiers are bad. 401ks are bad. Pensions in 1 tier are good. Unions will help you get them. This is the Valley Labor Report, and we'll see you next week.
WVNN Athens, WVNN FM Trinity, a Cumulus station. It's 11 o'clock. News starts now.
From ABC News, I'm Michelle Franzen. No new victims have been found following Thursday's partial collapse of a condo complex in Surfside, Florida. 4 people confirmed dead, more than 150 still unaccounted for. Governor Ron DeSantis met with families earlier.
Pray for the folks who were impacted either directly or the family. It's a really, really difficult time.
Crews are working against time, weather, and spot fires and smoke. Miami-Dade Fire Chief Alan Kaminsky.
The biggest thing here is hope. That's what's driving us right now.
Surfside Mayor Charles Burkett says the stability of the remaining building is also a concern. The cause of the collapse still unknown. A major drug maker settles a court case over opioids.
Johnson & Johnson agreed to pay $230 million to resolve claims related to its role in the nation's opioids epidemic as part of a settlement with the New York State Attorney General's office. This agreement helps Johnson & Johnson avoid trial that was scheduled to begin in this state next week. As part of the agreement, Johnson & Johnson agrees to exit the opioids business. It will no longer sell or manufacture opioids nationwide.
ABC's Aaron Katursky. New warning labels for COVID-19 vaccines after a review of heart inflammation cases.
The FDA is adding a warning about those rare cases of heart inflammation linked to the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines. Here at the CDC, they say that the majority have recovered quickly, adding that the benefits of the shots far outweigh the risk. But this news comes as vaccinations lag across the country, down 75% since April.
ABC's Elwin Lopez. A deadly hot air balloon accident in New Mexico.
Of the 5 people on board the hot air balloon when it hit power lines.